I think it's also fitting that today is Africa Day, because on Africa Day, as Africans today, we're taking ownership of our narrative a lot more. We're taking ownership of what it is to be African from a contemporary perspective, as opposed to this one-dimensional idea of what Africans are and who Africans are. And within the anthology, the artists within that anthology are African, and they are adding their voices to that discussion and that discourse about who we are today. And we often talk about it's important to tell our stories, but I think as important is to ensure that our stories do get out there, because it's one thing to just tell a story, but it's another thing to ensure that those stories are actually heard. Gerald Kraak was central to the vision and establishment of the Other Foundation. So this anthology, which is aptly named Pride and Prejudice, along with tonight's award, is to honor Gerald's contribution and legacy to advancing the rights of sexual minorities and gender non-conforming people throughout Africa. And I think it's also important to note it's a celebration of that legacy, but it's also about picking up that mantle and carrying that legacy forward. And the anthology and the awards serves as a great celebration and a great, in a way it's drawing a line in the sand and going from, there's this legacy up to this point, and we're going to pick up and run with it, beyond that line in the sand. But to do this anthology, the Other Foundation partnered with Jacana Media and put out an Africa-wide call for submissions. So the only criteria in terms of submissions was from a content perspective, which was it needed to be able to explore, interrogate, and celebrate the themes of human rights, gender, and sexuality in whichever way the artist or writer felt was appropriate for them. So there was no criteria based on genre, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's poetry, whether it's photography, journalism, essays, etc. So the only criteria was that it celebrate and interrogate and engage with human rights and gender and sexuality. So the final anthology was compiled by Sisonke Msimang, Sylvia Tamali, and Eusebius Makaiza, who were three of Africa's strongest social justice and literary appraisers. So they looked through over 390 entries from 20 countries across the continent in search of Africa's contemporary voices on gender, social justice, and sexuality. So most importantly tonight is also a celebration of those entrants, and not just the ones that were selected for the anthology, but I think every single one of those 393 people who submitted. These artists dig deep and bring their whole selves to the work. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of the anthology, and this morning, instead of going to work, I probably spent about an hour just working my way through half of it, and some amazing writing and amazing stories in there. The 13 different pieces that were selected are a testament to a new generation of writers and photographers who seek to reveal a deeper, more complex truth of identity in Africa, because we don't have a single identity. As Africans, I think our identities are as diverse as the number of Africans that exist on the continent and beyond the continent. So the stories in the anthology reveal a desire to fight for what is just and right, and to reject the concept that anyone is less than. I really believe that this idea of otherness, we often use otherness and it's appropriate that the organization is called the Other Foundation, because otherness is not a negative. Otherness is creativity and innovation happens on the edges and on the boundaries, and creativity and innovation often comes from the people who are deemed and labeled other. So for me, that label of otherness is actually a strong positive. So the award that accompanies this anthology is a way of honoring the excellence and beauty contained in the pages. It is a celebration of Africa and what it means to be Africa. So we hope that you're going to continue to eat, you're going to continue to drink, and you're going to continue to enjoy the event. I'd like to ask Samuel Shapiro, who's been the project lead on putting together the anthology for the Other Foundation. So he's been in the trenches in terms of making sure that this tonight happens and the anthology happens and the awards happen. So please welcome Samuel.
Hello, everybody. First, just start off with saying thank you so much for everybody for coming here. I didn't have the privilege of meeting Gerald personally, but I come from I've worked everywhere that he started. So my path in my life, my career, my activism has all in essence been led by Gerald. And that's exemplified in the Other Foundation, which he played an incredible role in starting. When Gerald passed away, the thought was that we needed to put forward something that could honor him. And you'll see in the anthology the most amazing work that they've produced. So thank you very much for coming. And before I speak for too much, let me hand back to Kojo, and please guys, enjoy the evening.
Thanks, Samuel. Next up, I'd like to invite the wonderfully talented Danielle Baula to play her first set for the evening. So we have music, hence the keyboard behind. And Danielle is a writer and musician. She's been published in places like Mail and Guardian and Elle. She's also a Mandela Rhodes Scholar and a Yali Fellow. So please welcome Danielle.
Hi everyone, how are you? You all look really nice. So we're going to start you off with a tiny love song. Oh, love is burned out, but oh, love, do you ever think about those hazy days played out against a gray backdrop? Now just memories, nostalgia and repeat. Oh, I had so much to your skin, no place between us, and no hiding, intoxicating. Lust is never ending. You are just all I dreamed of at 25. I am sober but touched. Oh, do you not think so far ahead? 'Cause I've been thinking about forever. Ooh, or do you not think so far ahead? 'Cause I've been thinking about forever. Ooh, I'm glad I let it go. I'm glad I let it go. 'Cause you feel like home. Yeah, you feel like home. I'm glad I let him go. I'm that I let him go, 'cause you feel like home. Thank you.
Be hard pressed to find an LGBTI organization that doesn't have Gerald's unique stamp on it. He believed in people's innate ability to rise out of struggle and forge their own paths and tell their own stories, and was very generous with how he helped people go on that journey themselves. There's a long way to go in the struggle for the rights of LGBTI people in Africa, but progress is being made, in part due to Gerald's contribution. Please join me in listening to the thoughts of two of his friends, Patty MacDonald and Jane Barrett, on who he was and what this anthology would have meant for him. Please just check the video.
My most enduring memory of Gerald was just fun that we had with him. But I think for me the most important thing is that he was beloved by so many people, and he managed to make everybody feel like they were his very dearest friend. And I never think of that in a disparaging way. I think he genuinely cared about so many different types of people.
We had a very close working relationship. We spent a lot of time on the road together, trundling around South Africa in a beaten old Volkswagen. After he left the country, I was working in the trade union movement, and I travelled relatively often to international meetings and would always make sure to go and see him when he was in Holland and then when he lived in London. And I guess it was in that period that our relationship went to a new level. We became not just sort of close work friends, but real friends.
The thing about Gerald was that he knew that this country was really, really in dire trouble, and I think that the kind of work he did with equal education and those kind of groups was quite profound, and to see that activist centre where it is and in the place it is just extraordinary. I can remember when they were in container boxes, equal education, and he really, really respected those young, fine, bright minds, and he was never pedantic about it in a way. He just was inspired by them, and when Gerald was inspired to do something, he made it happen, and that's what was so special about him.
He always thought beyond the moment, and I think it was almost only when he went that I realized the extent to which he was such a forward thinker. Gerald, in his work with Gala, really pushed the boat out and put sexuality on the agenda in a way that it hadn't been previously, and in a way that made it possible for very traditional institutions like the trade unions to relate to and take on board. And I think that was his gift to all of us.
I do feel that there is so much that Gerald still gives to this country, and being in the other foundation today is so important. I think that it meant so much for him that this could happen. And I think about the big building that's on the Cape Flats now. There is so much that Gerald left behind, that it is an extraordinary well-lived life. Short, but incredibly well-lived, and we are lucky to have had him in our world.
I sincerely believe it takes a special kind of person to put everyone that they come into contact with at ease in their presence. And also the idea of legacy for me is always in the people, in the what you leave behind and the people that you leave behind. And it's the people that carry legacy forward. And I think, I get the sense that Gerald has left a very, very strong legacy. I also believe that art serves as the soul of society. It serves as our soul on a collective level. And the importance of art, both in reflecting and mirroring, serving as a mirror for us, but as well as guiding our society and guiding our cultures forward, cannot be expressed enough. So art in all its forms provides us with a lens to understand the world, to understand its beauty, to understand its magic, but also its pain and intolerance, sadly. Ngugi wa Thiong'o once said that being is one thing. Becoming aware of it is a point of arrival by an awakened consciousness, and this involves a journey. To all the artists and the writers and photographers, you have taken us on your journey and enticed us to also go on our own, to discover more of who we are and discover more about our communities. That is the power that you have as artists, the power to truly reshape the world, to truly reshape Africa, to truly reshape each country, our communities, our societies. The judges, as I said in the beginning, we had 3 judges who went through over 400 entrants. And this is an opportunity to get a sense of their journey in terms of discovering what these artists had created. Once again, please check the screens.
Hi everyone, it's me, Sisonke. I am so sad that I am not able to be there with you all celebrating this incredible collection of the most badass voices that are out there on the continent. This anthology and this collection stands the way that it does. It is the embodiment of the man in whose honor we meet today and whose name this anthology has been put together. I only met Gerald once in my life, and it was close to the end of his own life. And we knew many people in common, and everyone kept saying to me, you've got to meet him.
In the memory and person and life of Gerald Kraak, we had an incredible citizen of the world, deeply committed to a more socially just world. But he also understood that social justice is not just a vision, it's not just an idea, a norm. Social justice fundamentally is about getting your hands dirty. That means funding projects that are sustainable, that are feasible, that can make a demonstrable difference to the communities that are on the margins of society. And those of us who were fortunate enough to have met Gerald, I didn't know him very well, but I have met him, are well aware of his legacy.
So the opportunity to do this anthology and to think about and read all of these words by people who represent a huge segment of the population who Gerald spent his whole life fighting for was too good to pass up. When we sat down to look at the many entries, many of them which were fantastic to read, I had no idea that we would end up with such a strong and varied collection.
The entries for the anthology were of a very high quality, and as a judging panel, we had a wonderful challenge to sift through such incredibly high quality work. It was a very difficult process for a number of reasons. Some of it, for those who are artists, will be of nerdish interest. Comparing apples with pears. How do you compare an entry of a photographer with someone who is a fiction writer? How do you compare a work of fiction in turn with a piece of journalism that is narrative non-fiction? So one of the difficulties for us were the impossibility of coming up with a fair way of comparing entries that speak to different forms of art.
It was incredible to work with the writers who took on our comments and our questions with a real rigor, with a real humility, and with a real seriousness. Because ultimately that is what the craft of writing is about.
I think the final anthology is one which we are enormously proud of, and which I think is a brilliant first anthology in the memory of someone who cared deeply about questions of injustice, about questions of particularly the LGBTI community's entitlement to be treated with dignity and with equality. And I hope that it will be well received.
Going back to Africa Day, we do still have challenges. We do still have barriers in terms of being able to move across, across the continent, as opposed to even beyond the continent. But with that said, we are joined by many of the 13 finalists tonight from all across Africa. The next video will introduce you to these artists as well as give you a glimpse into who they are and what was then infused into their work.
When I read who Gerald Kraak was and what he stood for, I thought the award has a special place in our literature and it has a special place in Africa.
Africa is a place with a lot of voiceless people and a lot of powerless people. If you make art here, you can't help but be political. I think it's very difficult to make art that's apathetic.
The city that I live in constantly inspires me. It's a melting pot of cultures that I'm continuously drawing inspiration from. It forces me to engage with my community as well as with myself, and I can't think of anywhere else in the world that I would want to live at this moment in time.
I chose to work on this project because I read about the atrocities that were happening to people with albinism in certain parts of the continent, and I really felt compelled to create a project or to create work that would generate conversation around the area.
I have lived in Nigeria all my life, and the world that my country is not perfect. But all these problems and the different ways Nigerians navigate them are things that either directly impact my writing or that I'm constantly aware of when I'm writing. And so when I write, I do so with a broken heart and with hope.
The issue of sexual minorities in Africa is one that needs to be given attention because there are a lot of communities in Africa where sexual minorities are not just denied rights, but they are actively subjected to violations of their rights.
I strongly believe the way we treat ourselves and see our own naked, vulnerable bodies is the root of many of the social issues we face as individuals as well as a collective.
So I think I did mention at the beginning there is also an award, and I don't know whether you're anxiously waiting, but I know the finalists are probably very anxiously waiting to find out who the final winner is. And to announce that winner is Sylvia Tamale, who was a judge alongside Eusebia Sensisonke. She's a leading African feminist who teaches law in Uganda. She's published extensively on issues of gender and identity, serving as a visiting professor at various academic institutions globally, as well as serving on several international human rights boards. She's the first female dean at the School of Law at Makerere University. I'm kind of proud to say that my father taught at Makerere University in the early 70s, so I already feel a certain bond with this place. Sylvia holds a Bachelor of Law from Makerere, a Master's in Law from Harvard Law School, and a PhD in Sociology and Feminist Studies from the University of Minnesota. Please welcome Sylvia Tamale.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Unlike Sisonke and Eusebius here, I have the privilege to be here in flesh, so the other foundation cannot edit. And by the way, that name, the other foundation, whoever thought about that name was a genius. Because it's an activist name. Whenever you say it, you have to explain it. This morning, I rang the reception at Southern Sun, next door where I'm staying. and I asked them, can you please tell me the venue where the other foundation's event is going to be? Say, the other from what? Which one is the other? Which is the first one? So you always have to explain what it is. So I'm really privileged. I was very privileged to be part of the panel that reviewed the entries. And what I'm going to do, I'll first talk very briefly about how I felt about the process of judging or reviewing, and then I will announce the winners. So, unlike Sisonke and Eusebius, I am not an artist. I'm not, a professional writer. Well, I'm a lawyer. Okay, I was trained to think. I was trained to rethink, to read and reread, to analyze and reanalyze. But my training taught me to do all this within the arcane and frosted thickets of the cold law, to argue along normative and traditional lines. So needless to say, I have always been uncomfortable with my legal mind, which is partly the reason why I entered the doors of sociology and feminist studies for my PhD. So participating in this process brought out to me in very bold relief what many of you seated around here this evening must have always known and must live every day. The magic and power of woven words, of visual images, that words can sing and dance on pages in very transformative ways, that visual images can speak and echo louder than a million words, that these genres can touch our very core in ways that the distant and cold legalese can never achieve. So I'm also a teacher, as you heard. The lecture room for me is my political platform for transformational change. Experience has taught me that the most effective way to shift students' consciousness in the staid walls of the law lecture rooms is through multidisciplinary approach. One that connects what the students are learning to their lived experiences. The process of reviewing and assessing the rich material which was submitted for the award was invaluable in providing me with ideas and material for my classes. It was so refreshing, so inspiring. It also left me in awe about the striking brilliance and abundant talent on our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we must tell our own stories. What better way to teach gender and the law, to raise awareness about issues such as gender-based violence, inclusivity, diversity, hate crime, history, and so on, than telling stories, reading poetry, using visual art. Many of you must have listened to the stunning ode that the poet Tony Walsh delivered at the vigil of the Manchester bomb victims 2 days ago. You'll all agree with me, places that are familiar to urban Africans, to slums and neighborhoods we all navigate. The woman in this collection is a stand-in for all of us. She is lesbian and a gay man. She's a successful woman, a prostitute. She's the embodiment of everything other that does not fit. That is a stranger in the very communities in which we are born. She's also triumphant and unapologetic and awkward and deeply vulnerable, while also continuing to simply be who she is. The choice of purple hair, the color purple as it were, is glorious and dangerous and heartbreaking because it is so singular and brave. We unanimously chose this as our co-winner. We are excited about the conversations this will inspire in an age of Instagram. Thank you very much, Sarah. So Sarah is here. Can you please come? The two winners happened coincidentally to be from Kenya, but from Sarah's name, I know she's from Uganda. And she's just whispered in my ear in Uganda. Wait, what did you do? I'm supposed to. Give it to me, and then okay, photo. Sarah, thank you very much, and congratulations. Okay. So Sarah will say a few words, if you don't mind. Wow, this is so unexpected. Goodness. Thank you so much to Jacana Media and the other foundation for even looking at my work and for including it in the anthology, and of course for this award. You know, when I set out to do this project, it was just as Sylvia said, as much as it was about albinism, it was also about I think all of us and the isolation that we feel for whatever various reasons, and I think it touched a core in everyone, and of course I want to thank Florence, who was the subject of the work. And even as people speak about her purple hair and her strength and her courage, that wasn't an act. That was who she was, and I think that that's what made the work so powerful. Thanks again, and I would just say to all the other people whose work is in the anthology and all the people who submitted their work, to continue to tell our stories, and how powerful it is to continue to tell our stories, to all the writers and photographers and graffiti writers and actresses and singers and all creatives. Just continue to tell your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Congratulations to Farah and to Sarah. I think Sarah did put it extremely well in terms of, the writing and the artistry and the photography and the anthology was of the highest quality, and not just from the two individuals who won, but every single person that, that had their pieces selected. And these are the voices that we cannot afford not to be heard. So to all the artists, continue to speak out, continue to ensure that your voice is heard. What I actually want to do, I wasn't told to do this, but what I actually want to do is, Sisonke wrote something in the editor's note, which I think is very apt and very appropriate. I edited this anthology, but we wrote this together. And I don't mean the authors and the photographers and poets and journalists and academics whose work you'll find here. When I say we wrote this together, I mean we who are Africans. Those of us who claim the identity that attaches to this continent in ways that are limitless rather than limiting. We wrote this. All of us wrote it. The homophobes and the resistors, the patriarchs and the subversives, the judges and the lawyers, we wrote this. We began to write this book when we challenged the laws that made us criminals for daring to love. We scribbled ourselves into existence when we walked down the street like b-boys, with caps turned backwards, and did not cry when someone screamed lesbian as though it was an epithet. The prologue of this book was written when we began to mourn en masse, whenever women were killed, when we decided to be detectives solving the murders the police would not touch because there's little value attached to a woman's life. The judges who selected the works that ended up in this anthology, and I am proud to have been one, read through hundreds of scores of stories. Much of what we read made us nod our heads and laugh and cry. We read many stories that were similar. Often we felt as though we were reading stories we already knew, and this was good because it reminded us that the book served a need. When the same story is told over and over again, it is because it has not been heard enough times, because the listeners are not listening. You will all get the opportunity to read the rest of that, but I just thought, after Sarah's words in particular, and Sylvia's words, that it was appropriate to share that little piece. So once again, a round of applause for Sarah and Clara.
What I want to do tonight is I want you all to raise your glass, because I think Gerald would be absolutely incensed if you weren't raising a glass to this. So I'm just going to raise. So let's all raise our glasses to Gerald Kraak and say thank you for your vision in making something like this happen. To Gerald. I'm going to speak closer to the mic. So our role in the anthology is that of midwife. And this is what publishers do, is we gather together material and we help shape it into something that is born into the world and goes out to populate the shelves of bookshops and then go out into the hands of readers and then change people's minds and then give people new ways to see things. And that's what we have been instrumental in doing, and that's what we are so proud to do. And the way that this book came about, the gathering of all of these people together, it has been something which just flowed and happened, and we know that when this kind of synchronicity happens, that it is meant to be. I've got a number of scattered notes here, so you'll have to excuse me if I keep on looking down. The partners that we worked with, we have a lot of friends in Africa. We've got publishers that are stretched from Ethiopia to Uganda to Senegal. And when this book came about, it was time to reel in those partners and to talk to them about how they would participate in this. And we spoke with Africa World Press, who've got their offices in Ethiopia. We spoke with Amalion in Senegal. We spoke with FemRight in Uganda, and there was no ways that they'd be able to bring this book into Uganda, but they supported us throughout. There was Gadsden Books in Zambia and Kwani in Kenya. There was Weaver Press in Zimbabwe and Word Weaver in Namibia. And they all helped to get the call out to bring in the entries that we see that have spread so far and so wide. The thing is that I may be a publisher at Chakana, but I'm not the one who actually made this book happen. And what I want to do now is I want to bring up Sibongile Machika. Are you here, Sibongile? Come along, come up here. And Clara Skinner. Come on, Clara. So that you know that these two are really the ones that made this book happen. Clara was the one who bossed everybody into absolute existence. Without Clara, without that force that made everybody get their entries in time, that got those judges shaking their little backsides, that got Sisonke absolutely working, that got everything happening, we have to thank Clara. Thank you. And for the vision behind the book, for the one who really, this is our new publisher, and Jacana is so proud of Spongile. And of course, I want to say thank you to everybody who's here, all of those shortlisted entrants, all of the judges, to Sisonke, to Eusebius, to Sylvia. Thank you so much. I just want to tell you, Daniela, I want to come back as you when I come back in a new life. That's what I want to say. And I also want to say that I have to tell you about the book. And what I'm going to tell you about it, it's information, is that it's going to be in all the bookshops around. So this word is going to be spread. Exclusive Books are putting it on their promotion of award winners. So you'll find it up on the shelves. It's going to be out there. So let's get out, make this book, celebrate it, buy it, and get out there and share it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bridget and the team from Jacana. So we're now kind of winding down the formalities. I'd like to thank basically all of you, as well as everyone who helped make this night possible. So a massive round of applause for our finalists and our two winners of the first award and the finalists in the inaugural Gerald Kraak Anthology and Award, the Pride and Prejudice. A round of applause for yourselves, please. And as I mentioned earlier, you will all be leaving with a copy of a book. So to keep the word out there, keep the word out at the forefront, ensure that everybody that you know comes to Exclusive Books to buy the book, since you won't be. I'd like to ask Samuel and Andisue to come and give a vote of thanks.
Sorry, I just want to start before I hand it over to Andisue because I've already spoken. And I want to thank just one person to start off with, and that is Carla Sutherland. She couldn't make it here today. Yes. Carla was key. Carla was the driving force behind making sure Gerald's work, Gerald's activism carried on into future generations. The idea that we need a sustainable movement for change comes from that and comes from the thinking behind it. So I just want to very personally thank Carla Sutherland.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kojo. It's been an absolutely beautiful evening. I walked in here and I thought, beautiful. And each time I said it to the entrance, I meant it when I said their work was absolutely remarkable. And I just like, on behalf of Jacana Media and the Jacana Literary Foundation, to thank your support as the other foundation. This wouldn't have been possible without your support and partnership. And I'd also like to thank every single person who digged within themselves, the people who've entered and made this book the beauty that it is, the judges from 400 to 13 amazing voices in Africa. It's a beautiful day to celebrate. And I'd also like to thank everybody who actually got the word out there about the award, and to also say that we are ready for the next round. And if you go, if you go to jacanamedia.co.za, you'll find the form and you'll be a part of this occasion again. Thank you.
And lastly, just to thank the team at the other foundation for all the work that they've put in, the effort. This has taken a lot of time and planning to put together, and obviously the team at Jacana. I know they've already been thanked, but from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much, and I look forward to working on future projects over and over and over again. So thank you very much. And just to make sure that everybody knows, when you leave, please make sure that you get your tag cut off and you get a book. Just housekeeping. Thank you very much.
We're not sending you home, so please don't leave just yet. We're going to have more wonderful music from Bridget in the next life. So Danielle's going to be coming up and sharing more of a wonderful voice and a wonderful music. There is food, there are drinks, so please enjoy yourselves. And thank you all very much for being a gentle audience. Have a good evening.